lounging, son.
All right, welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name is Ryan, and with me today, another dope indie cartoonist creator. We got Barry Tan. You already saw him on we did a group chat on the new Ghost Agents book that's live on Kickstarter right now. I'll drop the link down below. But wanted to take time, kind of spotlight a little bit of Barry Tan and talk to him, kind of like pick his brain a little bit. So welcome to the show, dude.
Hey, hi Ryan, thanks for having me. Greetings from Singapore.
Yeah, dude, it's a huge pleasure to be able to talk to you. I can't stop staring at your bookshelf. I try to not like look at the names of what you have. You have great shit on your wall, by the way. But anyways,
thanks.
So let's get into this. You know, I do on every spotlight I do, any interview I do with somebody for the first time. You know, you never know who's not familiar with your story, who's not familiar with your work. So I like to know like kind of what your love for comics, right? How that started, and then in turn, you know, how did that led to you wanting to be a creator yourself?
Yeah, sure. So you know, the very first comic related story that I remember reading was a 1976 annual of John Buscema that my uncle gave me and my brother. So this was like a hardcover annual that kind of reprinted a couple of issues from the Buscema Tom Palmer run with the female liberators and everything. But how I really kind of got into comics was really through the comic adaptations of the 80s cartoon. You know, all the various cartoons like Thundercats, G.I. Joe, and you know, Dino Riders, for example, because the 80s were kind of a golden age for action adventure cartoons. And through the cartoons, you know, I noticed that they were publishing this. I think Marvel at the time had some sort of publishing deal with Titans Books or something. So they had these hardcover annuals that will collect, you know, a couple of issues from the comic adaptations. And they also had some activity pages, you know, a couple of pages of prose and all of that. So I kind of got into comics through those annuals. And, you know, I would say that the very first actual comic, monthly comic that I actually remember owning is Legends #4. So by John Byrne and John Ostrander. So that's, you know, the last page was this fantastic splash of Darkseid with this huge metallic hound. So that was how I kind of got into the whole Jack Kirby thing as well. And that started me down the path of collecting comics. So, you know, after I read Legends, I moved on to buying my comics off the newsstands. And some of the very first comics that I bought was really Jim Starlin's Silver Surfer with Ron Lim on the art. And I would continue, you know, kind of picking up comics from the newsstands. And I think it was around the mid-90s that I started discovering comic shops. And that's how I kind of also started collecting or was introduced to Image Comics, Spawn, Youngblood, the early titles. And from then on, you know, it's, yeah, pretty much, I've been collecting comics regularly since then. Probably the peak of that period was really the early 2000s when Joe Quesada took over Marvel. So that was a really exciting time. Dark Knight Returns, the sequel, Dark Knight Strikes Again, was coming out. You know, there was Grant Morrison on New X-Men, Kevin Smith on Daredevil, you know, and all those great books. So that was really the period where I was, you know, I would say that was the period I was really hooked and, you know, started really getting into it. And I transitioned from, you know, being a Spider-Man or Batman fan into a Frank Miller fan or John Byrne fan. And, you know, I started kind of using them as my benchmark and their stories as a benchmark, because at the time they kind of got their act together with the trade paperbacks, right? So they started reprinting really good stuff like Walter Simonson's Thor, Frank Miller's Daredevil, and all of that. And I kind of, I would say, formed my taste during that period because I was exposed to all these great runs. And yeah, based on you know, my kind of fascination with the comics themselves, I really started getting into the art side of it. So I've been drawing on and off, you know, since I was a kid, but probably in the early 2000s, that's when I really went into the tools of the trade and trying to figure out different techniques and all that. Yeah.
You know, I like that you mentioned that the early 2000s and you were mentioning like the Marvel stuff, because me, you know, same here. Like, I think that is, I mean, I think maybe you're probably just a little bit older than me, but
sure.
The 2000s like was a great time at Marvel. I think that it was more like as opposed to the early 90s where it was more artist driven, it was more writer driven, I think, in the early 2000s. But I think that that's some of my favorite Marvel stories. Kevin Smith is like one of my favorite people on the planet. So like him taking over Daredevil was, I mean, amazing, right? And then
Yeah.
you know, 90s image, obviously, like I agree, like that's really great stuff. But another thing I just want to mention, because you point out, you said they got their act together and they started doing trade paperbacks. That's something
Yeah.
that people nowadays, right, that are getting into comic books, maybe, you know, even my brother, when he was, you know, he's 11 years younger than me, he didn't have to experience that. Like by the time he was getting into comic books, they had trades. You know, when I was a kid, not everything was collected, dude. It was like a little, like maybe like really popular things like Watchmen was collected, Dark Knight Returns collected, but runs, like I think people take it for granted, even though Marvel doesn't keep stuff in print very much, you know.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I think they do take it for granted, like the access that you have to these classic and great stories, and how hard it was for, you know, us when we were getting into comic books to kind of go back and get it. You either had to drop a lot of money on back issues or
Yeah.
just wait. You know what I mean? Just kind of wait around and see if they would collect
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there was such a wealth of reprints, during that period, because like prior to that, Frank Miller's Daredevil had never been reprinted, in terms of the complete run. They did that through the Daredevil's Visionaries, Frank
Right.
Miller books
Yeah.
and
I
all that.
remember
Before
those.
that, they kind of did the Elektra saga, but that was like years ago. And even like Jack Kirby's Fourth World. So, that's kind of seeing, that's been reprinted recently in omnibuses, absolute editions and all that. But for many years, the only available collections of those were these black and white trade paperbacks that were released, I think, around 1995, 1996. And they didn't even bother kind of restoring the color. It was literally black and white with gray tones. And that were the only collections that were available for maybe like a period of 10 to 15 years. So, it's really great now. I mean, even in my own libraries, there wasn't any trade paperback collections or sections back then. But now it's just stock, like literally shelf full of some of the latest collections. So it's definitely, yeah, I would say that's a great thing.
Yeah, it's pretty dope. I mean, I want to talk about influences too, because like you're talking about like the stuff you were reading, right? Some of the books, creators. I'm looking at the shelves behind you too, and you know, I'm seeing Craig
Yeah.
Thompson, I'm seeing Los Bros Hernandez, I'm seeing Jim Rugg, I'm seeing Piscor, David Lapham. So when did you start, like, because I know there's always that transition, right, where you're starting with like DC and Marvel as a kid, like that's your gateway into comic books. Most people, I
Yeah.
don't, and if you're getting in as a kid, you're not jumping in, especially nowadays, you're not jumping in like an Image, right?
Sure.
When did you transition into some of these other types of books that are not superhero genres, that really kind of expand on what comics can be?
I would probably say that the first kind of independent title that I picked up was really Grendel. So the original, I guess it wasn't the original, but it was the Devil by the Deep, story. So kind of it was like prose with illustrations with Matt Wagner. So that was something that I picked up early on, probably in the late 90s. So
Mhm.
that kind of got me started. And also I was picking up Wizard magazine at the time. So there would be Palmer's Picks,
Yeah.
of course, and I was introduced to a lot of the more non-mainstream books, I would say, through Wizard Comics. Actually, I mean, for all the kind of excesses of Wizard magazine and all that, they did. They were kind of a strong presence, all the way to the mid 2000s, I would say, and it was through publications like Wizard magazine that I really was exposed to stuff like Grendel War Child, and then I started picking up Daniel Klaus's stuff, which was unlike anything in the normal mainstream comics that I was used to seeing. But
Mhm.
it was fantastic. It had kind of a life of its own, and the art was just to me was just sublime. I think I really got into it probably somewhere around 2016. So I would say fairly recently. And the reason why was, I started to get really burned out on mainstream comics. It was one company driven event after the other.
Mhm.
So I started moving towards other comics like the British comics 2000 AD and all of that. I think most recently I started getting into like creators like maybe Al Columbia, Charles Burns, and all of that stuff. And I would say that that owes I would owe a great depth to my introduction to the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel, because they kind of got me started on a lot of books. In fact, the only reason that I kind of stumbled onto the Cartoonist Kayfabe Ringside Seats group was through their review of the Image Grand Design book.
Oh, okay.
So through the channel, I kind of that channel, when I was introduced to it, it was really I would say it was a revelation, that somebody would go into so much detail in terms of the craft behind the comics. And through that channel, I found the Cartoonist Kayfabe Ringside Seats, and I would say further broadened my tastes in terms of the sort of self-published comics in particular that I was introduced to through the group.
I mean, I think I have the same exact experience, pretty much exactly. Like I did, like there was creators that, like I was reading indie stuff before the channel, but definitely like opened up like, during the pandemic, man, so much money. I spent so much money because of that channel, because they would, and then like I learned like, okay, if they're going to drop an episode, you got to go get that book before it's been out too long, because the prices just skyrocket on eBay, especially something that's out of print, right? Something that may have been $2 in the morning, by the end of the day, it may be 20 or 30, right? And I think the Ringside Seats group, see, because I know Eli from the comic shop I work at. So when he was putting together Wizard #1, he knew I ran a website. Before my YouTube channel, he asked me to help edit it. Because he was like, I don't think he was on a deadline, but he's like, hey, would you mind helping me kind of look it over? I was like, all right. And I'm like, what is it? Like, I've heard of Cartoonist Kayfabe. What is it? Like I didn't even really know. But as I began editing with him and reading it, I'm like, dude, this is awesome. And then I found the group, he added me to the group and stuff. And I think we mentioned it in the episode with, Rocco and the guys. It's just so much positivity, and there's so much creativity in that group. And if you sit back and think about Ed and Jim starting a channel to talk about comics and craft, and then what has come from that, right? Like not just a group of fans, but there's comic books coming out. There's, work coming out of this group because of something they started that we may not have got if that channel didn't start. It's pretty mind-blowing to think about.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would say that it's an entire community that is united in terms of the love for comics. And these guys, a lot of them, like I've become a huge fan of people like Ben Perkins, Chris Anderson, people who are working on Ghost Agents through my time in the Cartoonist Kayfabe Ringside Seats group. Because you kind of get excited as somebody who's into comic art in general, and you see the work that these guys are putting out, and on a regular basis, it kind of give you a a little kick in the ass to kind of get started on your own comics and all that. And I would say it's hugely inspirational. It's I think everybody is inspired by one another. So like Ed said, iron sharpens iron, so everybody is kind of in the group, they're supportive, and it's a great thing, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how, well, first of all, before we talk about your involvement with one of the projects in the group, so you discovered the Image Grand Design, but and then you jumped onto Darkest Image, which the PDF is available. Again, I'll drop that link down below for people. I know it's going to be in print, I think Mark said in November. So I'm definitely waiting for the print version. But what work, and you've sent me some of your work. So you sent me a couple of the stories from Darkest Image. Really dope. I saw the Ghost Agent story, awesome stuff. But what other work have you done prior to? Do you have anything that you have done in print before, or is this going to be like some of your first print stuff?
Yeah, I would say this is probably some of my first print stuff. I've done my own personal projects, throughout the years. So every year, after I graduated and started work and all that, I would set aside some time to do my personal projects. And this would be comics related, so it would be mini comics or illustrated books and all of that. But these were kind of for my own enjoyment. So maybe, I would do a limited print run for friends and family. But this would probably be a run of maybe like 10 to 15 issues where I would pick all the materials and then do a small print run. But I would say Darkest Image is probably the first of my work that I would kind of classify as non-personal work or more fan-driven anthology work. So I would say Darkest Image, and then my first work that saw print would probably be a pinup that I have in the recent Grendel zine that Eli and Ben released. Yeah. So I literally, their channel is great, the Grendel podcast. So, I would put it on and I would do my own drawing. And literally one day I just sent Eli and Ben a piece of fan art telling them that, I really enjoyed I enjoy your podcast and I always have it on when I'm drawing and all that. And Eli decided to kind of take that pin up and include it in the magazine. So, I was really stoked about that. And that is, I would say, my first work that saw print. Darkest Image would be the second, when the printed version comes out in November. And then it's Ghost Agents after that.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, I mean, it's because there's so much craft in your work, like very like a seasoned artist, and I mean, like you've been around. So like when I found out that this is probably your first stuff, like that's going to see print, I was blown away. So it's got to be like very exciting for you to see your work. Like, I mean, just the Grendel scene, because you talk about being a Grendel fan. I knew of Grendel, never read it until Eli. He kind of gave me that kick in the ass, to make me go read the book. And I love it. Yeah, I mean, I think Grendel's dope. But let's, unpack a little bit. We've talked about Ghost Agents, so we don't need to get too much into that. But let's talk about the Darkest Image stories and kind of what led you. Obviously, you're a fan of the group and you're a fan of the channel. So I'm sure that's what kind of motivated you to want to be a part of it. How did you choose the stories you were going to do?
Well, I kind of went into the project with some idea on what I wanted to do. So the first story that I came up with was really the Violator verse 2-pager. Because, I was kind of a fan of the old early Image comics, and I liked that version of the clown who would be ranting on for pages, and kind of bragging to kids in the alley or something. So I wanted to take that and kind of just poke fun at the whole Spawnverse thing that, Todd McFarlane is doing now. The second story, which is the Sky Solo 1963 story, Rocco actually approached me about doing the story. So, I had this pinup, I think I mentioned in the last chat, of the planet from 1963, complete with, full Silver Age Marvel lettering and everything. So, Rocco thought that I kind of got that era, and, maybe, I would be a good fit in terms of the story that he wanted to contribute, which was the 9-pager that saw print in Darkest Image. So he contacted me and we kind of hit it off because we basically have the same interests in terms of comic creators and all that. We both love Kirby, Ditko, as well as Jim Steranko. So we really hit it off, and the story you wrote, I was just really into it. So that story was, I would say conceptualized by Rocco, but I was more than happy to kind of jump on board because, it's everything I want to draw in a script. Before that, I've never worked with a writer. So usually I just write for myself. But, it was a fun exercise to kind of take somebody's script and then reinterpret it, through my own lens. Yeah, because the thing about drawing a story is, when I write and draw myself, the only person I think about pleasing is myself. Mm-hmm. But when I'm working off the script, from another writer, I have to also factor in the fact that, I need to hit certain marks. I need to kind of convey certain things through the drawing. And so I was more mindful of that for that particular story. And the last story, I would say that the whole impetus to join the Darkest Image project was really, I picked up a copy of Super Mag by Jim Rupp, and that book was a revelation for me because, the sort of versatility that he displayed through the book in terms of the different styles, that really inspired me. So I knew going in that I wanted to do all my stories in different visual styles, as kind of a homage to my experience with Super Mac, because I thought that that was the way to go. The thing is, sometimes and some of the correct, the creators that we love best, they have their own signature style. But for Jim, it's kind of, the art is in service of the story. So he will adapt his style. Street Angel may look different from Aphrodisiac, and that would look different from Plain Janes, and so on and so forth. And I thought that was the approach that I wanted to take. So Street Angel came about, due to my love for Jim Ruck's stuff. Really, I thought that the Street Angel character was just a great vehicle for doing fights, action and all of that. And I had the idea, what happened if you pit, the deadliest kid against the ultimate child predator, which was Billy Kincaid. And through that, the story kind of formed, because, Street Angel lives in Angel City, while Billy Kincaid is an agent of the devil, or Malbolgia, for example. So there were these little cross connections that I thought would make for an interesting story. And that's how I landed at the Street Angel story. Yeah.
I loved your stories. I think they're awesome. And like I said, I think Rocco described you as a kind of a chameleon to adapting styles. And I think that is what Jim Rugg does, right? Like you said, just that Super Mag, the way he jumps back and forth, his Red Room covers.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, my God, dude, each cover completely, you get the feel for the character or the creator that he's homaging, but it also feels like Jim Rugg, at the same time, which that's such a hard thing, at least for me as a fan, not an artist, looking at it. It seems like such a hard thing to kind of do, right? To emulate these different artists while also putting your spin on it.
Yeah, exactly. The variant covers that he did, that would take a great deal of study into the individual, artists that he was kind of emulating, because he got everything spot on, from the colors to the font type, everything. So that was, I think those are some of my favorite variant covers I've ever seen, because I'm not into variant covers, to be honest, but
me either.
I kind of made an exception for Red Room, because those were just fantastic. I love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles one in particular.
I know.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah,
I know. I hate variant covers, and working in a shop and having to list them on eBay and stuff like that, or deal with it and pricing.
Yeah.
It's an annoying aspect of comics, but for certain creators, I was like, okay, I get it. I get why Ed's doing it, right? That's just the way the market is. I think Jim Mahfood is doing it with Girl Scouts. He's got a Jim Rugg cover, but whatever. There's certain covers where I'm like, okay, I have to have those covers, because that's something I would hang on my wall. If it's something that I'm willing to hang on my wall and it's not going to sit in a short box or a long box or whatever, then it's worth buying. But that's what I don't get about variants. People will buy every cover. We have customers who will buy every cover to every book they get. Eternals #1, the one that just came out a few months ago, had 12 covers or something like that. She bought every cover of the book. I'm like, dude, this is ridiculous. What are you going to do with it? And then you hear about the paper shortage. Yeah, there's a paper shortage because they're printing too many goddamn covers. So maybe if they printed less covers, we could get more comic books, But I don't need to go on a rant about that. That's
our own personal rant, I guess.
Yeah.
Even personally, I've never really gotten variant covers. I mean, I love those Red Room where it's so well executed. But for those that, they kind of look like Marvel has been doing a whole slew of covers where it's digital art, but the art is so slick, so slick, so realistic that, I can't recognize the artist's hands in that, literally I can't differentiate between, a whole slew of the recent illustrators who are doing their variant covers, because the line work just isn't there. It's all digital now. So you don't see the quality of the line, like a Klaus Jensen ink line. That's unmistakable, but not in the case when you start kind of photoshopping stuff, or you do digital art where you kind of get rid of the basic holding lines and all that. So yeah, I would say we're pretty much on the same page as far as variant covers are concerned.
Speaking of digital, are you all traditional in terms of the way you're producing your art, and maybe just touch up with digital, or what's your process like?
Yeah, so I would say that I've been pretty much working all traditional all the way up to about 3 months ago. Yeah, so all this while, I've been experimenting with traditional tools, deep pens, brushes, fine liners, and all that because I just kind of like the tactile feel of drawing on paper, with some of the traditional tools and all that. But I kind of recognize that not not being well versed in using digital tools, that would be kind of a blind spot. So with this year and the pandemic and all the restrictions, I really wanted to kind of level up in terms of the areas that I thought were my weak points, as an artist. So the things that required or the things that I wanted to address immediately was, first of all, I wanted to kind of pick up digital art. If for example, if I don't create something completely digitally, at least, in terms of post-production, touch-ups and all that, I would be using that Procreate, for example, as a tool to kind of facilitate all the post-production aspect of that. And I also wanted to pick up stuff like lettering using Ames Guide, and also just, for example, brush up on my anatomy again. So this year was really, for me, yeah, very art driven, I would say, and digital art, or going into digital art, was a part of that. And I actually got a book, a beginner's guide to Procreate, to kind of pick up the tools and all that, and slowly ease my way in. And I would say, I think looking at it now, it's a great tool. I still prefer drawing traditionally because having ink on your fingers and playing around with the different textures, it's just different. But in terms of post-production, I would say there's no comparison. Like, for example, for the Sky Solo story that was kind of rejigged for Ghost Agents, if I were to do that traditionally, I would have to do paste ups. I would have to white out all the logos and all of that, and I would have to do a lot of physical work. But I actually did that all, in a couple of days using Procreate. So it's kind of a time saver, I would say. And definitely, as an artist, it's a blind spot if you kind of stick to working traditionally only. So yeah, I would say it's been a boon in terms of since I've picked it up.
And then, so besides the Darkest Image, besides the Ghost Agents, what other work? I mean, well, I know you sent me the 2-pager for the TMNTs, and can you talk a little bit about how you got onto that project?
Yeah, so Jamey The Galley, I hope I'm getting his name right. He's doing this Punisher Craven story that he posted on the cartoonist Kayfabe Ringside Seats group, which I was a huge fan of. So one day he kind of had this post where he was calling for submissions for this Turtle Power zine that he was going to put together. So he had some of the submission guidelines, like 1 to 2 pages and all that. And that was something that I was into. I really love the old Mirage TMNT comics. So I kind of thought up of this two-parter, ensured that everything that I wanted to draw was on these 2 pages, which included the homage to the first cover, Krang, the Technodrome, everything I could possibly want to. I crammed into that 2 pages, and I sent it off to him. And he said he really liked the story, and so it's going to be part of the Turtle Power zine that will be coming out. I think it should be out probably end of the year.
Okay, cool. And that's going to be in print too, or is it going to be digital only? Do you know?
Yeah, that's going to be in print. I think it's going to be a small print run, and should be up for order. I think maybe sometime November, December period.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I definitely got to be on the lookout for that. And
It's going to be cool.
Yeah, I mean, I love Turtles, dude. Turtles. I think that's what started the friendship between Eli and I, was the Ninja Turtles. Yeah, I love the old. I have the entire original Mirage run. I have almost the whole second volume. The Image one, I don't have a lot of, and then the 4th one's hard to find. But I have like the whole beginning of the 4th, but like where it gets towards the end, where it's like really sporadic when it was coming out. Those I don't have, and they're so expensive. They are so expensive now, so it's impossible to find them. But anything else in the works? Any other projects? Anything that you're going to do by yourself like that? Since you're doing all these other things, and it's kind of, you said, kicking you in the ass to kind of get stuff done.
Yeah.
are you going to do your own project?
Yeah, I think in the near future, the kind of projects that I'm involved in, I think it's not I would say not very high commitment in terms of the page count. So I'm going to be contributing to the Batman Year One reimagining or cover, which is kind of like the Weapon X book that came out recently.
Mhm.
So 2 pages for that. I have some ideas for the second issue of Darkest Image, and I've received a script for a second story from Rocco for Ghost Agents. But I've also kind of been looking and thinking about doing my personal project. I would say it would probably be an autobiographical, humor-based kind of comic, where it'll probably be kind of like a Adrian Tomine sort of thing, where
I was going to say that. I was going to say that too. Okay.
yeah, kind of me making, just kind of observations I've made, live observations or observations of the comic collecting scene, with a bit of a humorous slant to it. So I think those will be a nice change of pace, because that allows me to then exercise another set of muscles. Because for these humor strips, having a detail intensive style just doesn't work. So you have to kind of strip down the style and go for a more simple sort of style. And I think that would be a nice change in pace. Yeah.
Okay, cool, man. Yeah, like I'm definitely I'm excited for all that stuff. Definitely want to see something that is solely your creation. Adrian Tomina, I love his stuff. So if you're gonna do something along those lines, I mean, the minute you said humorous, like slice of life type stuff, like autobio, I'm here for all that. That's like some of my. That's I think it might be my favorite genre now. Like the slice of life stuff, like Love and Rockets, like stuff like that. So very excited for that. Very excited for Ghost Agents. When we talked last episode, I wish you guys nothing but the best and success with that stuff, and I know it's going to be very successful. Before I let you get out of here, though, what are you reading recently that you've really been digging? Maybe that you want to recommend.
So yeah, I would say in terms of my recent reads, a new series that I've picked up recently was J.H. Williams' Echo Lens.
Yeah.
So the art is fantastic on that book, absolutely incredible art. And I've been digging Ultra Mega. So Ultra Mega was the surprise. I would say it was a surprise book for me, for the year, because I kind of had no expectations for the book, but was just blown away by the artwork and the story and all that. So that's a big one. And I've also been getting into old reprints of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So while researching, I don't have a complete run of the Mirage issues. So while researching, doing research for the 2-pager that I did, I bought all the IDW collections that were available, but those are missing some of the issues, like the Rick Beaches Down by the River issues and all that. But it's still pretty good reading, and that's been hugely inspiring. And I would say the last thing that I've been trying to complete is there's this new book called Old Gods and the New, which is put out by Tomorrow's Publishing. So it's a companion book about Jack Kirby's Fourth World. So I'm trying to make my way through. But like you mentioned, the read pile is just getting unmanageable. I have a huge pile of books. Because sometimes when you're creating and you're drawing, you're not consuming because you need to get the project done, right? So there's this huge backlog of stuff that just keeps piling out. And if you don't buy the book at the time, like the artist editions and all that, you may never be able to get those again. So, I just start stockpiling a lot of stuff, and hopefully I can get through them, during the holiday period. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same way, dude. And like I said, right, like the Kayfabe channel, if it looks like something that I'm gonna want, I just don't watch the episode and I go order it. Sometimes I'll watch the episode but like I have like 3 short boxes full of single issues that I need to read, and probably about 30 trades. And it doesn't stop because I still get my comics every Wednesday when they come out. So, and those always go to the top of the read list. I read the new stuff first, and then I make my way the rest of the week. But yeah, there's only so much time in the day, and I think every comic book fan they have to have a huge read pile. Maybe mine's pretty extravagant with the 3 short boxes, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But again, I want to thank you so much for chatting with me. I would love to talk with you again, in the future. You got some other stuff you want to talk about. Anytime you want to chat comics, I'm here for it. For everybody listening and watching, can you share where they can find you online? And I'm going to drop all your links down below.
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook, and I also have an Instagram account where I kind of post different pieces of artwork as well as behind the scenes or process stuff at so my account is Barry_Tan for Instagram. And I think that's pretty much it. I don't have my own Etsy shop and all of that. I don't have enough work to kind of warrant setting something like that up yet. So yeah, it's just Facebook and Instagram.
All right, cool, man. Well, I'm going to drop those links. Everybody hit the link for Ghost Agents, hit the link for Darkest Image, and go support those books. And Barry, thank you again. And we'll do this again soon.
Thanks, Ryan. It was really great talking to you and kind of just going about and talking about all our fanboy pet peeves.
Yeah, definitely, man.